Hi, and welcome back to Gavin Sonex B. Well, the time has come, the walrus said, to talk about VW Type 1 engine pushrods and the issues that I've had with them. If you've watched the previous video that I did some time ago now about the pushrods, everything seemed to be going well up until it wasn't going very well. Basically, the kit is the turbo kit is supplied with a set of pushrods, and they're the type that you have to cut to length yourself and insert one end into, and they look a little bit like this. And then you have to insert, once you've cut them to length, insert a little end in like that. And I cut the first 4 for one side of the engine, measured using the measuring tool that they provide with the kit. And because it was the first side, I did all the measurements. I measured every single one, cut them all. They all seem to be the same length, and everything was good. So I thought, what I'll do is then I'll measure the second side once and then cut them all the same length, and that'll be fine. But it wasn't. I cut the second lot based on one measurement that I took on one rocker, and they weren't accurately enough, or weren't cut to length accurately enough, and a small error in the length of the push rod will actually put you out of range of adjustment on the rocker itself. So I got a bit dejected at that point, but I ordered another set of push rods from Sonex. This is during COVID, I think it was at the time, and they took quite a long time to come. And when they arrived, immediately I noticed that they were subtly different in that they were a different colour. They were silver. And really didn't think much of it. They still had the same sort of insert ends, and so I decided that I would keep the 4 original ones that I'd cut and were okay, and that I'd do 4 new ones for the other side of the engine, using the ones that had come from Sonex the second time. And I cut those, and that all seemed to be going okay until I was turning the engine over and I noticed that something odd was happening with the end as it went into the rocker. And to show you this, I'm going to have to put the camera on its little stand, and because I can't hold everything at the same time. So bear with me, I'll be back in 2 seconds. So here we have some of the push rods, and this is an original push rod that was supplied with the kit. This is a replacement push rod that I ordered from Sonex, or via Sonex separately, a bit later on. And I'm going to be showing you the latest set that I've purchased from elsewhere. The issue is to do with the little ball on the end of the push rod and the way that it fits into the rocker. Now, if you look at this one, you can see that there's a bit of clearance between the rocker and the push rod to allow the push rod to move. And actually, when it's in the engine, the rockers do come down a long way like that. Now these work fine, but what I found was that the replacement ones have got hardly any ability to move, and the reason is that the tip from the shoulder to the end is shorter on these than on the original ones, and it's quite a reasonable difference. The original ones are about 8.3 millimeters from the shoulder to the tip, and the new ones, or the replacement ones, let's say, they're only 6.6 millimeters, which, you know, doesn't sound like a lot, 2 millimeters, but it makes a huge difference. And I did a little bit of an analysis on it, and the original ones would deviate by 20 degrees from straight, and the replacements would only deviate by 10 degrees from straight. And what was happening was, with the new ones, as the rockers were going up and down, the edge of the rocker was hitting the shoulder on the push rod and lifting it out of its socket. And obviously that is not good. For one thing, it messes up the action of the valves. Another thing, it causes damage and could result in engine failure if left unaddressed. And so I did my little bit of research and sent this off to Sonex, raising my concerns that this batch of push rods potentially were no good and could result in an engine failure. To be given a, well, I'll come back and speak to you now. Only to be given what I thought was a, I don't know, a bit of a flippant reply from Sonex Tech, saying that they were aware that with some of their OEM parts, they vary depending on where they come from, and the best suggestion was to actually file a bit off of the rocker to allow the extra travel. Now, to me, that's not good practice. For one thing, these rockers are made like this for a reason, and if I decide to chop bits off it, it's quite likely to fail, because it's been designed like this to be reliable, and I'm not really willing to file lumps off a fairly vital part of the engine. So what I decided to do was to ignore that and scour the world for a set of what looked like original push rods, and I found some in the UK, very, very similar, not identical. They are different yet again, but the important thing is that the distance from the shoulder there to the top is longer than the silver ones, and in fact it's actually longer than the original ones as well. So that gives us an extra degree of freedom, and I'm happy with those. But now obviously I've got to cut them to length and make a set for one side of the engine. If anybody does have any of these, I wouldn't use them. So that's the saga of the push rods. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the measuring device, measure them one at a time, and cut each one to length, and then insert the end. The only way I've found of successfully getting those ends in is to stick the whole thing in my hydraulic press and press them in. They're not particularly easy to get in. If you do that, you need to use something to hold the push rod straight whilst you're doing it, because obviously as you put the pressure on the end of the push rod just wants to bow. So I use a little piece of angle, steel angle, which I hold in my hand round the outside of the push rod, just to keep it straight whilst I'm inserting the end, and it seems to work. So I'm going to busy away and have a go at that, and if you're really unlucky I might try and do one in front of the camera, but I wouldn't hold your breath, because it's a fraught process and I'm probably going to get annoyed. Anyway, I'll let you know what happens more later. So after a bit of toing and froing and this and that, I have cut the push rods, and this time I've done a better job. I've measured each individual rod separately and cut them to length in a much more accurate way, and it is down to accuracy. I've come to the conclusion you've got to be pretty accurate in getting the length of those rods right, because a millimetre in either direction is too much and you run out of adjustment on the rockers really quickly. So concentrate on getting them absolutely spot on. Now, the original sets that I made, I cut the tubes, the actual push rods, with my Dremel, I seem to remember, and it was such a long time ago. It's about 10 months ago I think now. What I've done is this time I have used a pipe cutter. Let me turn the camera around. A standard plumbing pipe cutter, and that is far easier to position in the right place once you've marked it, and it takes a bit of doing. You have to do a tiny little turn on the adjustment and then rotate a couple of times, a little tiny bit more, because the push rods are made of pretty hard stuff, and so I did that, used the press to press the ends in as I did previously, and these ones have come out much more accurate, and they fit and everything is good. So based on that, I have actually gone on a bit further, and I'll show you where I am now. I have actually adjusted the well, you Americans call it backlash, but in the UK it's the tappet gap, or there's various, but basically adjusted all the tappets on both sides, set them, and then I've put the rocker covers on both sides as well. So it's looking a bit more like that. I've also done a little bit of pipe work. I've finished off the oil breather pipe, which comes down here and disappears into our catch tank. I've test fitted the, we won't call it a carburetor because it's a throttle body injector, the aero injector. Test fitted that just to have a look and see where that's going to end up. And one thing I've noticed is that even with everything tightened up, because this intake pipe is attached to the turbo via a silicone hose, everything's a bit mobile, and that's going to kind of vibrate and do all sorts of weird stuff there. So what I'm proposing to do is to make a bracket which will go from the accessory plate bolt fixing there and come across, and I'll Jubilee clip it onto the pipe and try and help stabilize it. I've been looking at routing the throttle and the mixture cables, and I think an orientation like this, where the two cables come out this way, and then I'll sweep them up and go through the firewall up here somewhere, so it's a nice big sweep around. I've also fitted the rest of the breather, which comes out of the bottom down and out there. I've got silicone hose fitted from the turbocharger, where the hot water is coming out of the turbocharger and returning to the header tank. That's in place. I have fitted and secured the oil line, which goes back to the scavenging pump, the oil pump, and I've fitted it on a couple of places on its way to the bottom of the turbocharger, and that's all secured as well. On the other side, I've fitted my flexible oil pipes, my turbo filter, oil filter, to the turbo. Those are all done up and tight. That's where the other end of the silicone pipe goes into, or comes out of there basically. So we've got the hot water coming out of the turbocharger past our thermostat switch and then off, returning back to the header tank. Haven't done the other side yet. What else have I done? I think that's probably about it for the moment. I set the gaps on all the spark plugs, and all 8 spark plugs are in and tightened up as well. So odds and bits and pieces really. I've got to go to the hospital this afternoon for a check-up with the consultant, so I'm not going to get much done this afternoon. Been looking at the propeller and the bolts that I got for the propeller. You have to get your own ones. They don't come in a kit, even though I bought the propeller and everything from Sonex. I was a bit concerned that the ones I bought were not, they were too long, I thought, but good look through the Senstek information. Is that how you pronounce it? Sensnich? I don't know how you pronounce that. The propeller manufacturer anyway. And having done all the calculations, the bolts are actually the right length. So with a washer under them. Basically, when you tighten them up, it compresses the wood core of the propeller a little bit, and when they're torqued up, I think it's about 21 thousandths of an inch compression approximately, which I think is about 0.5 millimeter. And I've got probably 3 millimeters to play with there, so it should be fine. We'll soon find out, because when I torque them up, I'll either run out of thread or I won't. One of them I shall probably over torque just slightly, just to make sure that it isn't bottoming out on the thread, but it shouldn't be. I've done all the calculations, it should all be good. One little interesting thing that happened overnight was that Andy from the Sonex WayX build site put up a video of his fitting his brakes, and I immediately jumped in and sent a comment saying, "You put your brakes on upside down." But after checking all the diagrams, I've got my brakes on upside down and his are up the right way, as according to the drawings. But as anybody who's bled hydraulic brakes knows, you want the bleed screw at the highest point on the brake cylinder to get the air out, otherwise it's a complete nightmare. And that's what I did. I looked at the actual equipment and didn't read the drawing, and I put mine up this way. So you can see that the end where the fluid in is lower, and the end where the bleed screw is higher. It'd probably be better if we looked at the other one on the other side. And I did it that way round just purely because I didn't want any air in there, because it's a pain in the arse when you're trying to bleed brakes and you've got air in there and you can't get it out, and you can't turn the aircraft upside down. So it just seemed logical to me. But of course I'm not fitting the wheel pants, and Andy is, and so there's a backing plate that goes behind, or in between the, I'll show you. There's a backing plate which I haven't fitted, which goes between the cylinders, brake cylinders, and the axle stub. And what I noticed on the drawings when I was looking at it this morning was that on the drawing for the tail dragger version of the Sonex and WayX, there are some captive nuts on this plate, and I can see why they've put the cylinder up the other way. It looks as if it's to avoid the nipple and or the, the bleed nipple from interfering with the captive nuts, possibly also to make it easier to get at without taking the wheel pants off, but I don't know, it's up to him which way he does it at the end of the day. Knowing Andy, he will follow the instructions because he likes the instructions, and that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, Sonex have come up with a set of plans and instructions and drawings, and I've just looked at a couple of other photographs I've got of other Model Bs, and they have indeed fitted their brakes upside down as well. We won't call it upside down because actually it's up the right way, but not the way I would put them. But anyway, that probably doesn't make any sense, but there we go. So I'm quite pleased with the progress on the engine. In a couple of days we've got quite a few things wrapped up. I've been through, one of the things I have done is I've been through the manual, the Aero V manual, and I've thumbed through every single page in it and just made sure that I have done everything that is required on each page, and if I'm happy with it, I've ticked it off. And I've got 2 or 3 pages in there where I haven't completed things, like I haven't put the turbo shield on yet, and a few other little bits and pieces. but pretty much that's the engine buttoned up. I mean, I've got compression now. When you turn the propeller over, it goes plump, 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 which it should do. And I suppose my next task really is to get the throttle and well, to drill some holes in the firewall basically for the throttle, the mixture, and of course the cables. Got to get the cables through, and I've come up with a novel and cheap way of doing that, which I'll tell you about in the next video. So until then, a relatively happy Gavin, made some progress, and not lost my temper too much, so that's good. See you later. More later.